There is a particular quality to the silence in a house when you are the only one left in it. It's not a peaceful silence, not the gentle hush of a winter's morning or the contented quiet of a sleeping child. No, this silence is different. It's a presence. It has weight. It settles in the rooms like dust, and no matter how many times you run the cloth over the surfaces, you can't seem to wipe it away. I've become an expert in this silence. At 74, Dorothy Williams, a widow of 12 years, a mother of 2 grown children who live provinces away, and a grandmother to faces I mostly see on a screen, this silence is my most constant companion. My little bungalow here in Oshawa, with its well-tended garden my husband, Arthur, used to fuss over, feels both too large and too small all at once. Too large for the echoes of a life that was once so vibrant, and too small to contain the sheer volume of memory. And as another birthday looms, the 75th, a milestone that feels more like a summit than a celebration, the silence has become almost deafening. Tomorrow is the day. My daughter, Claire, had been pestering me for weeks. "We have to do something, Mum." 75. It's a big one. Let me fly out. We'll have a nice dinner. Just something. I'd resisted. The thought of a fuss, of forced jollity, of pretending that the absence at the head of the table wasn't a yawning chasm, felt exhausting. But Claire, she has her father's persistence. She'd worn me down. Fine, I'd finally said, the word tasting like surrender. A quiet dinner. Just you and me. At that Italian place your father liked. And so, the plan was set. And with a plan, came the inevitable question of what to wear. It's a silly thing, perhaps, to fixate on at my age, but Arthur always said I had an eye for clothes. He'd call me his elegant Dorothy. Last evening, the night before my birthday, I found myself standing before my wardrobe, its sliding doors a barrier to a museum of my past. I pushed one aside, the rumble of the track unnaturally loud in the silent bedroom. There, tucked towards the back, protected by a yellowing garment bag, was the dress. A simple, sleeveless shift dress in a shade of cobalt blue. It wasn't flashy or particularly fashionable by today's standards, but it was the dress I'd worn to Claire's wedding. Arthur had loved me in that dress. He whispered in my ear as we danced, "Blue was made for you, my love. It makes your eyes look like the summer sky." I hadn't worn it since he passed. It felt too weighted with joy, a joy I was no longer sure I deserved to feel so keenly. But for my 75th birthday, a dinner in his memory, it felt right. A way to bring a piece of him with me. My fingers brushed against the plastic of the garment bag. Yes, I thought. The blue dress. That night, sleep found me quickly, a heavy, dreamless blanket I was grateful for. But it didn't last. The dream came on slowly, like fog creeping in from Lake Ontario, indistinct at first, then chillingly clear. I was in a garden, but not my own. It was my father's garden from the house I grew up in Halifax. The roses were in full, riotous bloom, a cascade of crimson and ivory against the old wooden fence. And there, standing by his prized Queen Elizabeth rose bush, was my father. He'd been gone for over 30 years, a victim of a heart that had simply given out after a lifetime of hard work. But in the dream, he was as real as the pillow beneath my head. He wasn't the frail, tired man of his final years. He was the robust, strong-handed father of my childhood, wearing his old tweed flat cap and a soft, flannel shirt, his eyes a clear, piercing blue. He didn't say hello. There was no preamble. He just looked at me, his expression not angry, but filled with a profound, aching urgency. The kind of look he'd get when he had something vitally important to impart. "Dorothy," he said, and his voice was exactly as I remembered it, a low rumble that felt like home. It bypassed my ears and resonated deep in my bones. I took a step towards him, the dream grass soft beneath my bare feet. "Daddy?" He held up a hand, not to stop me, but to emphasize his words. His gaze was locked on mine, unwavering. "Don't wear the dress tomorrow, Dorothy." The words were so simple, so specific, and so utterly bizarre that I felt a jolt of confusion in the dream. The dress," I stammered. "The blue one." He gave a single, sharp nod. The urgency in his eyes intensified, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something else there, sadness, a deep, paternal sorrow that seemed to stretch across the decades between us. "Don't wear it," he repeated, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet every syllable was crystalline. "Just don't." And then, the garden began to dissolve. The roses lost their color, bleeding into a gray mist. My father's image wavered, his form becoming translucent. I reached for him. A cry caught in my throat, but my fingers closed on nothing but cold, damp air. I woke with a start, bolting upright in my bed. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed 4:17 a.m. The room was pitch black, the silence of the house now feeling menacing, watchful. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, frightened bird. I could still see him. I could still hear him. The feel of his presence was so vivid, so tangible, it was as if the air in the room still vibrated with the echo of his voice. "Don't wear the dress." I pushed the duvet aside, my limbs trembling. I walked on unsteady feet to the wardrobe and slid the door open. There it was, the garment bag, a pale ghost in the darkness. I stared at it, a cold dread seeping into my veins. It was just a dream, I told myself. A strange, vivid dream brought on by pre-birthday anxiety and grief. My rational mind, the part of me that balanced checkbooks and made grocery lists, scoffed at the idea. It was nonsense. But the part of me that was still his little girl, the part that had believed him when he said he'd fix the wobble in my bicycle wheel forever, that part was terrified. The conviction in his voice, the sorrow in his eyes, it felt more real than the floorboards beneath my feet. I stood there for a long time, in the deep silence of the pre-dawn, caught between the logical world and the haunting echo of a warning from beyond the grave. The morning of my 75th birthday dawned gray and still. I had slept fitfully after the dream, my mind churning through the fragments of memory and that single, inexplicable command. Sunlight struggled to pierce the thick layer of cloud, casting the house in a dull, monochrome light that matched my mood. I moved through my routine by rote, the slow descent from the bed, the shuffling steps to the kitchen, the ritual of measuring coffee grounds, the wait for the pot to gurgle its completion. Each action was familiar, yet felt alien, as if I were an actor playing the part of Dorothy Williams on a very somber stage. The dream clung to me like a shroud. All through my breakfast of toast and tea, I could hear my father's voice. "Don't wear the dress." It replayed in my mind with the relentless precision of a scratched record. Why? What possible reason could my long-dead father have for caring about what I wore on my birthday? It was absurd. Patently absurd. Yet, the feeling of dread persisted, a low, throbbing hum in the background of my thoughts. I found my eyes drifting again and again, towards the bedroom, towards the wardrobe that held the blue dress. It was just a piece of fabric, a collection of seams and thread. But it was also a vessel, and it was filled to the brim with Arthur. With the memory of his arm around my waist as we danced, with the scent of his cologne, with the sound of his laughter as he twirled me under the fairy lights. To wear it was to invite him to the dinner, to feel, for just a few hours, that he was still by my side. But my father had never steered me wrong. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, his words were measured and true. He wasn't a man for whimsy or for interfering in what he called women's business. For him to appear to me, with such stark urgency, it couldn't be ignored. Could it? The conflict was a physical ache in my chest. It felt like a choice between two loves, two loyalties that were now, impossibly, at odds. To honor Arthur's memory, or to heed my father's warning. By mid-morning, the silence in the house had become unbearable. I needed to get out, to breathe air that wasn't thick with memory and dream whispers. I decided to walk to the small local grocer's, a few blocks away, to pick up a few things for Claire's visit. Perhaps the simple, mundane act of choosing fruit and buying milk would ground me, would remind me that I was a sensible woman of 75, not a frightened child spooked by a bad dream. The air outside was cool and carried the promise of rain. I pulled my light coat tighter around me and began my walk. The neighborhood was quiet. Most of the houses, like mine, were home to people my age or older. I saw Mr. Henderson meticulously edging his lawn, and Mrs. Pinter walking her ancient, slow-moving terrier. We exchanged waves, the silent, Comfortable greetings of longtime neighbors who know the shape of each other's lives, but not the intimate details of their sorrows. The grocer's was its usual haven of calm order. I took a basket and moved slowly through the aisles, my mind only half on the task. I was in the dairy section, staring blankly at a wall of yogurt, when I heard a voice beside me. "Dorothy? Dorothy Williams." I turned. Standing there was a woman about my age, her hair a carefully styled cap of white, her eyes warm and familiar, though it took me a moment to place her. "Evelyn," I said, recognition dawning. "Evelyn Miller? Good heavens, it is you," she beamed. "I heard you were still in the area. It's been years." Evelyn. We'd been friendly. Our children had gone to school together for a time before her family moved across the city. We'd lost touch, as people do. Life gets in the way. Seeing her was a jolt, a connection to a past that was separate from Arthur, from grief, from blue dresses. It was a past that belonged to school bake sales and PTA meetings. We fell into step together, our carts squeaking a companionable duet as we shopped and caught up. We spoke of our children, our grandchildren, the passing of time. It was pleasant, normal. For a few minutes, the weight of the dream lifted. Then, as we were nearing the checkout, our conversation turned, as it inevitably does at our age, to losses. "I was so sorry to hear about Arthur," Evelyn said, her voice softening with genuine sympathy. "He was such a lovely man. I always remember you two at the school dances. You were like something out of a film. So in love." The mention of his name, in this context, was like a key turning in a lock deep inside me. My eyes welled up, to my own surprise. "Thank you, Evelyn," I managed, my voice thick. "Yes, we were." "And you," she continued, her gaze thoughtful. "You were always so strong, Dorothy. I remember when your father passed. It was so sudden. You held your family together with such grace. Your father, he was a character, wasn't he? Such a quiet man, but you always knew he was a fortress." A chill, entirely separate from the store's air conditioning, traced a path down my spine. My father. We had been talking about Arthur, and now here he was, summoned into the conversation. "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He was. I'll never forget something he said to my husband, Bill, once," Evelyn went on, oblivious to the turmoil her words were causing within me. "It was at one of those summer fates, must be 40 years ago now. Bill was joking about how you'd just gotten engaged to Arthur, saying he was losing his little girl. And your father, he got this very serious look on his face. He put his hand on Bill's shoulder and he said, 'It's not about losing them, Bill. It's about making sure the man who takes your place knows the value of what he's been given. The weight of it. You have to protect their joy, even from themselves sometimes.' I always thought that was such a profound thing to say. Protect their joy, even from themselves." The world seemed to slow down. The chatter at the checkouts, the beeping of scanners, it all faded into a distant hum. I could only hear Evelyn's voice and behind it, the echo of my father's from the dream. Protect their joy, even from themselves. The pieces, jagged and disconnected, began to shift in my mind. The blue dress was joy. It was pure, unadulterated joy from one of the happiest nights of my life. My father's warning, was it an attempt to protect me from that very joy? But why? Why would he want to protect me from happiness? I must have gone pale, because Evelyn reached out and touched my arm. "Dorothy? Are you all right, dear? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile, a brittle, cracking thing. "I'm fine, Evelyn. Just a little tired. It was so lovely to see you." We exchanged hurried goodbyes and promises to have coffee that we both knew would likely never be kept. I paid for my groceries and walked home, my mind reeling. Evelyn's story hadn't solved the mystery. It had deepened it, giving my father's warning a new, more complex context. He wasn't just being arbitrary. His words to Bill all those years ago painted a picture of a man deeply concerned with stewardship, with the safeguarding of his daughter's heart. Back inside the silent house, the conflict returned, fiercer than ever. The blue dress hung in the wardrobe, no longer just a symbol of love for Arthur, but now a focal point for this bewildering paternal intervention. I had to make a decision. Claire would be here in a few hours. I had to get ready. I stood before the wardrobe once more, my hand resting on the cool plastic of the garment bag. My father's face, so vivid in the dream, swam before my eyes. The urgency, the sorrow, and now the memory of his words, as recounted by Evelyn, protect their joy, even from themselves. What was it about the blue dress that needed protection? Or was it me that needed protecting from the blue dress? With a trembling heart, I knew I couldn't wear it. The fear, the respect for my father, the sheer unnerving power of the dream, it was all too much. I would choose another dress. Something simple, neutral. A beige knit dress that held no memories, sparked no joy, but also promised no pain. But as I laid the beige dress on the bed, a profound sadness washed over me. It felt like a betrayal of Arthur. It felt like I was agreeing that the joy we shared was something dangerous, something to be locked away. The silence in the house seemed to agree, pressing in on me, heavy with disappointment. I was doing what my father asked. But why did obeying him feel like I was losing a part of Arthur all over again? The afternoon bled away into a dull, gray evening. The rain that had threatened all day began to fall, a soft, persistent pattering against the windows that seemed to amplify the silence within. I moved through the final preparations for Claire's arrival in a kind of numb trance. I set the table, not with our fancy wedding china, but with the everyday set, its patterns faded from years of dishwasher cycles. I put out a single, small vase with a few blooms from the garden, Arthur's garden, but the gesture felt hollow, a pantomime of normalcy. Each time I passed the bedroom and saw the beige dress lying innocuously on the bed, a fresh wave of that conflicted sadness would wash over me. I had chosen my father over my husband. That's how it felt in my heart, a childish, reductive interpretation, but the heart rarely deals in nuance. The blue dress, still shrouded in its garment bag, felt like a ghost in the room, a silent, accusing presence. When the doorbell finally chimed, cutting through the monotonous rhythm of the rain, I jumped, my hand flying to my chest. I took a steadying breath and went to answer it. There stood Claire, her smile bright and immediate, a beacon in the gloom. She held a bouquet of vibrant yellow tulips and a large, gift-wrapped box. "Happy birthday, Mum," she chirped, stepping inside and enveloping me in a hug that smelled of rain and her familiar, floral perfume. "Oh, Claire," I said, my voice muffled against her shoulder. The simple human contact, the warmth of her, was almost enough to undo me. I held on a moment longer than usual. She pulled back, her hands on my shoulders, her perceptive eyes scanning my face. "Are you okay? You look tired." "I'm fine, darling," I said, the automatic response. "Just a bit of a strange night. Come in, get out of that damp coat." She bustled in, filling the quiet house with her energy. She put the tulips in water, chattering about her flight, the traffic from the airport, how she couldn't believe her mother was 75. I watched her, this beautiful, capable woman I had raised, and felt a surge of love so fierce it was almost painful. This was a different kind of joy, a present-tense joy, not one preserved in the fabric of a dress. We drove to the restaurant through the wet, gleaming streets. The familiar Italian place, Giovanni's, was warm and bustling, a stark contrast to the quiet of my home and the tumult in my mind. We were shown to a corner table, the same one Arthur and I had often sat at. The ghost of him was here, too, in the red checkered tablecloths and the scent of garlic and simmering tomatoes. We ordered, and for a while, the conversation flowed easily. Claire told me about her job, her friends, a new man she was seeing whom she thought I might like. I listened, I smiled, I asked questions. I was playing my part, the interested, supportive mother. But I could feel the undercurrent of my distraction, and I knew Claire could sense it, too. It was when our main courses arrived, a lasagna for her, a chicken parmigiana for me, that she finally put down her fork and fixed me with a gentle, but direct, gaze. "All right, Mum," she said softly. "What's going on? You've been a million miles away all evening. And you're wearing that beige dress. You never wear that. I thought for sure you'd wear the blue one. Dad's favorite." The directness of her question, the mention of the blue dress, was like a pinprick to an overfilled balloon. The carefully constructed dam inside me broke. The words tumbled out in a rushed, emotional torrent. I told her everything. The plan to wear the blue dress. The vivid, terrifying dream. My father's urgent warning. My confusion, my guilt, the profound sense of being torn between two pillars of my life. And then, today, I ran into Evelyn Miller. I finished, my voice trembling. And she told me something your grandfather said, decades ago, about protecting joy. It all feels connected, Claire, but I don't know how. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Claire listened, her expression shifting from concern to deep thoughtfulness. She didn't dismiss it as a silly dream. She didn't tell me I was being irrational. She simply listened, her food growing cold, her full attention on me. When I was done, she was silent for a long moment, staring into her glass of wine. "That's incredible, Mum," she said finally, her voice low and odd. "And frightening." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was warm and solid. "But, it makes a weird kind of sense to me." "It does," I asked, bewildered. "Think about it," she said, her eyes earnest. "The blue dress. It's not just a happy memory, is it? It's the happiest memory. It's the pinnacle. Claire's wedding. You and Dad, dancing, so in love. It's a perfect moment frozen in time." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "And tomorrow," she continued, her voice gentle, "you turn 75. Without him. You're going to that dinner, to this very restaurant, trying to summon a ghost. Trying to recreate a feeling that can't be recreated. Wearing that dress. It would have been like trying to fit into a skin that doesn't exist anymore. The contrast between that perfect, past joy and the present. The quiet, the loneliness. Mum, it would have shattered you." Her words landed with the force of a physical blow. They were so clear, so insightful, they cut through the fog of my confusion like a laser. "Grandpa wasn't trying to stop you from remembering Dad," Claire said, her eyes glistening. "He was trying to stop you from hurting yourself by comparing your present to a perfect, untouchable past. He was protecting you from the pain of that comparison. Protect their joy, even from themselves. He was protecting the memory of that joy by stopping you from tarnishing it with the inevitable grief of the present. He was protecting you from setting yourself up for a heartbreak so much sharper because you went looking for it, dressed in the symbol of your greatest happiness." A single, hot tear escaped and traced a path down my cheek. Then another. Claire's interpretation was so simple, so profoundly loving, it unlocked the deep, frozen sorrow inside me. The sobs came then, quiet but wrenching. They're in the warm, noisy restaurant. They were not just sobs for Arthur, but for my father, for his enduring, watchful love that had reached across the veil of death to spare his little girl a specific, subtle kind of agony. He hadn't been forbidding me, he had been shielding me. Claire held my hand tightly, letting me cry, her own tears falling freely now. It was a release, a catharsis I hadn't known I needed. The other diners faded away. There was just my daughter and the profound, healing truth she had spoken. We eventually composed ourselves, our food cold, but a new warmth settled between us. The ride home was quiet, but the silence was different now. It was a companionable, understanding silence, filled with the aftermath of a shared emotional revelation. Back at the house, as we were having a cup of tea before bed, Claire brought out the gift-wrapped box. "I was going to give you this tomorrow, but I think you should have it now." I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Nestled inside tissue paper was a beautiful, soft, cashmere wrap in a deep, ruby red. It was gorgeous, modern, and held no history. "It's for right now, Mum," Claire said softly. "Not for the past. For you, Dorothy Williams at 75. For your joy, whatever that looks like today." I wrapped it around my shoulders, the fabric impossibly soft. It felt like an embrace from the present, from the future. It felt like permission to find a new kind of joy, one that wasn't tied to a specific dress or a specific memory, but to the woman I was now. That night, as I lay in bed, the rain still whispering against the window, I thought of my father. The dread was gone. In its place was a vast, aching gratitude. He had seen a danger I couldn't, a danger woven into the very seams of the blue dress. He had loved me enough to step out of the quiet of eternity to guide me. And he had used my wonderful daughter as his messenger to help me finally understand. The blue dress could remain in the wardrobe, not as a source of pain or a symbol of a forbidden joy, but as a beautiful, preserved memory, its perfection untarnished by the inevitable sorrows of the present. It was a relic of a love that was, not a benchmark for a life that is. And for the first time in a long time, the silence in the house felt not like an absence, but like a peaceful, waiting space. A space for me,